The current definition of clutter is that it is something that gets in the way of or stops us from curating a home that aligns with our self-identity.
This is Life Work with Maya, where we talk about success on your terms and tune in to work and lives that feel spacious, abundant, and aligned with who we truly are. Okay, so I have Caroline Rogers back with me, and today we are digging into clutter and organizing. So we set the stage last week thinking all things home and psychological home. And now I would love to delve in with Caroline on maybe some more specific ways that she works with clients, but also how she brings in the coaching element and also the positive psychology element to make this an extra special process. This is not just practical process, it's got layers to it. And us both being MAPCP students and having done our own research and interested in positive psychology, there are probably a few areas that we want to debate as well. And so I, first of all, want to ask Caroline, because I know she has published research in this space about the idea that clutter is subjective. So when I hear that as a layperson, I guess, I'm thinking, well, hold on, a space either looks clear or it doesn't. Right? It either looks cluttered with lots of pieces on it, or it looks nice and almost minimal with just the barest few items that should be there. And to me, that's not subjective. It's like I could go into somebody else's space and make that decision. That would be the kind of the argument to say that it's objective. But Caroline has done research into this, and I would just love to hear at a high level, what is it that makes clutter subjective, and how did this come up in your research?
Nice to see you again. Thank you for having me. What happened in my research was that the data told me that well-being is not contingent on how much stuff people have in their homes. It's how they feel about it. And that's a real layperson's easy sort of, it's far more complex than that in terms of the statistical analysis and everything that was involved. But it was that. And I wept when I discovered that that's what the statistical analysis of the data was telling me. And because I had always known that. And I think I remember presenting the research to APDO, the Association of Professional Declutterers and Organisers, and saying, and of course, we already know that. We knew that, didn't we? We knew that clutter's subjective, but it isn't there in the research yet, and it is now. And why do we know that clutter is subjective? We know because I know, for example, that you share your home with your husband and your 2 children. What is treasure to you may be extraneous or clutter to them. What is of value to your children and treasure at the moment might be clutter to you. I agree with you that you can go into a room and you can say, there is stuff on the kitchen counter. But to name it as clutter is almost I think it's quite unfair, because in there might be stuff that is of value. We describe a place as looking cluttered, but it might be perhaps that, again, that's we need to be really clear about what we mean by that. When I work with clients, our job is to work out whether a toothbrush, a cardigan, a chaise longue is clutter or treasure. And the current definition of clutter is that it is something that gets in the way of or stops us from curating a home that aligns with our self-identity. There are even there's an academic paper with a title along the lines of, is this possession me or not me?
What an incredible definition that is of clutter. The fact that the clutter in the definition of clutter is the word identity. I think that is so powerful.
Yes, it really is. And it took, I remember that the feeling of triumph when we came up with that definition, because that notion, like it was like we talked about before, that notion of self-identity was so crucial when it comes to home, that surely clutter has to be something that is stopping that self-identity from being evident there.
I wanted to let you know about my masterclass. It's around the corner on the 16th of March, which is a Thursday, and it's at 12:30 p.m. UK lunchtime. I do hope it will work for my international listeners as well, even if it's kind of one of the first things you do in the morning or a bit later in the evening. I know I've got some amazing international listeners in places like Nepal and Slovakia and Canada. So do keep listening, and I really hope you're able to attend this as well. And really, in this podcast, we talk about all the themes that come up with my clients and I know are important to them, because I want to be able to support you in your thinking, feeling, and actions when it comes to life, work, and success on your own terms. But what do clients come to me for? They come with very specific goals around wanting to take their careers to the next level. They want to get paid more in work that feels really aligned with who they are, in work that truly excites them without having to sell their soul, burn out, work 14-hour days. And this is the stuff I'm going to be talking through in my masterclass. I have a simple method for this. And simple doesn't mean that it was just sort of developed overnight. It's been years in the making with published research behind it, quite rigorous stuff that it was, had to jump through a number of hoops. So it's really properly validated stuff based on hundreds of leaders in financial institutions and who have trained at LBS. It's also based on my experience directly coaching clients, hundreds of leaders that I've coached over the years, which is why I'm now accredited at master level with one of the top 3 professional coaching bodies. And finally, it's based on my career experience. I do increasingly get asked by clients about my own way of doing things. I wouldn't say I took the typical path on a number of things. And this stuff also plays into my method. So this is what I'm going to talk through on that day. I shared it early last week and I was surprised to get a really quick number of signups, and I am keeping this intimate. It is a private masterclass, so I want to keep it feeling intimate and like a real masterclass. So if you are interested, don't hesitate, get yourself registered, and then if you do register, do honor that place, because I will be capping numbers, and so I wouldn't want somebody to take that place that could have gone to somebody else. I look forward to speaking with you in a different format in that masterclass. And this is why when I'm trying to, because I get basically in January or at the end of December, I get a lot of people ringing me, or when they've moved house, they'll be like, we've just discovered that we've got really unhealthy amounts of clutter. We don't even know where to begin. We don't know where to start. And I'm not a decluttering expert, but what I say to them is like, okay, so this is one of those slightly more extreme situations where it's just so overwhelming that you don't even know where to begin. What I recommend you do is pick the space that you want to be in, that you would normally have put all of that stuff in, but now you realize it's just too much stuff to fit the space, and just put the stuff back that you actually want in the space and just leave everything else out. And that way it can sit there and you can make those decisions later. So you get to be what you need the space to be, and you just put the other bit aside, you create a bit of distance. And then once your move has kind of settled down, and once you can face that stuff, you can look at it with a little bit less overwhelm, because it's kind of like the space is set. You can get on with your life. It's working in a way, hopefully, that works for you, and it can help you understand what to do with the rest of the stuff. That's like my emergency situation solution for the various people that like have too much clutter in their lives. No names.
What I love about that is that the idea of taking something from where it has belonged, so say taking a book off a bookshelf and putting it into a neutral place, kind of changes the nuance of the relationship with that possession already by putting it in a neutral place. And then perhaps then it is easier to consider it and to decide whether it's clutter or treasure when it's out of its natural context. There's loads of academic literature on what they call, I don't know where these words come from, it's called possession disposition. And basically what that means is letting go of things, of possessions. Ironically, we find most of that in consumer psychology. And perhaps we could infer that why are consumer psychologists looking at this? Well, they're looking at it so that the more we get rid of stuff, perhaps the more we might be prepared to buy more stuff. You know why? But even with that sort of lens, it's really useful to examine what works for individuals once they've made that decision that this is in fact extra, that it is no longer required, that it is clutter.
I mean, I can't believe that there's a academic term for the idea of dispossession and detach. I mean, it's just fascinating that all of this exists. I'm going to now move away from the kind of definitional stuff into some practical pieces. So one of the things I found on your site was the 10-minute rule, which I just thought, I've actually been talking about a very similar thing in January on this podcast, which is that I would allow myself to do 10 minutes of a particular space before I could then veg out in front of Netflix in the evening. And I just found that a very doable thing on a busy day to keep the momentum going. I did say that it required one bit of patience because you obviously don't get the dramatic results if you kind of like spend a whole evening or a whole weekend decluttering and bags of stuff, but you know, it's kind of more sustainable and you can probably go further with it, you know, in terms of the amount of days you can stick to it. But I know you've got a whole thing about this, and I think it's so beautifully displayed. And for people who want to go and look at your website, just if you want to share the name of your website to get some of these tips. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about that 10-minute rule and how it's working maybe for clients or people around you.
Yes, it came about because of that question of how long is 10 minutes? And I think the answer to that question is, well, it depends what you're doing. You know, if you're laughing, it's about a second. And if you're waiting for a bus, it's about 4 hours. But it's amazing what we can get done in 10 minutes. And it's also amazing how many offerings of 10 minutes we have. You know, we might be on hold to a telecoms company or cooking pasta or something like that, you know, and is there something that we can whiz round and do? Or can we set a timer and agree with ourselves that for those 10 minutes, just that 10 minutes, that's all we need to do. We're going to focus on this one thing. And then, you know, on my website, there's a few ideas for each room. So say in the kitchen, it might be to find everything in the kitchen that doesn't belong in the kitchen and put it either on the way to the room that it belongs in or elsewhere, or take everything out of the cutlery drawer and give it a good wipe and put everything back neatly whilst checking that you still want and need everything, that these are treasure knives rather than clutter knives, say.
I love that.
Yes.
This is where I think the expertise comes in, you know, for you as an organizer, is to really help us get clearer on that next step. Because I often say the reason why we don't do things, either mindset or because we're not clear on that next step. I mean, such a simple task like running around the kitchen, you know, putting all the things that don't belong in the kitchen. It's something that, you know, my kids could understand as well. And it just makes it so clear in a thing which can often feel overwhelming to us.
Absolutely. And what you're reminding me of is the number of people I've worked with who talk about how when they were younger and their parents would say to them, go tidy your room. And they would think, I don't know what that means. Whereas had their parents said to them, go and find every item of white clothing that needs washing and bring it down to where we keep the washing machine. Or start by looking for everything that you can put in the rubbish, or collect together the Lego, put the Lego in one pile, the clothes in another pile, and the something else in another pile. You know, that is getting us towards tidying. And I think for many of my clients, even that notion of categorizing is new to them.
And would you say that there is almost a formula? And I've come across Lisa Woodruff, who, I don't know if you've come across her. She's now doing a PhD in this space because she wants to get a research thing for all the work that she's been doing. So she might be an interesting person for you to connect with anyway. But she gives these basic rules for kids of like how to do your room. And I think it starts with trash, and then it's the next bit is like put things in their home. Or she's just broken down a little formula. And as you're saying that about the kitchen, I'm just wondering, are there like 5 things that we could almost apply to a room when we're overwhelmed and we haven't unfortunately been taught how to do this, that can simplify it? Like starting with, first of all, putting stuff in the rubbish. Second of all, taking anything that doesn't belong in that room out of it. Like, is there a typical formula that can be applied as a starting point when we're feeling like that?
I hope it's okay for me to say that I am not a 10 top tip person. I am very much a what works for you person, because and I think that that's actually a crucial part of this. I'm delighted that somebody is doing a PhD in this field. I really am, because I think we need to pay more academic attention to this. It's a crucial topic. But I also think that there is not a cookie cutter solution to this, or a one size fit all. What there is there are solutions. And perhaps if your family or you and your housemates are in the practice of having discussions around how can we more beautifully live together and coexist in this space, then perhaps the 10-minute jobs for your household are going to be like you. They're going to be about you and the age that your children are and the activities that you and your children do. And so perhaps cleaning out the cutlery drawer isn't going to be as important as spending 10 minutes to make sure that you have 5 different bags with different kinds of PE kits in each one, ready for this, that, and the other. You know, we're talking about systems, aren't we? And we're also talking about time saving, and we're also talking about habits. What kinds of habits do you, as a household, want to have? What kinds of rules do you want to have in your home? Almost, people with staircases very often have. You walk past the pile on the stone, you think, well, that's not my stuff. I'm not putting that away. But perhaps in the house, it could be that the rule or the consensus is that if there's stuff on the bottom of the stairs, we always take it up, whoever it belongs to. If there's a bit of rubbish on the floor, we always pick it up, whoever put it there. And then whose domain is the laundry? Whose domain? We need to have discussions, don't we? We need to. Remember, that whole thing about falling in love. Falling in love is like the best thing ever, isn't it? It's great. But then living together as a couple for the next 50 years of your life, suddenly, whether your partner is really buff and has a sense of humor starts to become less important than whether or not they close the toothpaste. These are all, they put the seat down after they've been to the loo. Does it matter? We need to have these conversations with each other.
I love that.
We need to work out. We need to work out what's important to us.
Yeah.
When you have people come to stay, do you have a conversation with them about what's acceptable and what's not in your home?
That's a good question. I don't think so. I think it's just sort of inferred, isn't it? In my case, yeah.
I would love it if I came to stay with you. I would really appreciate it if you told me where you want me to put my used tea bag and things like that, so that when I do something wrong, I will have done it deliberately to upset you rather than. But I always put the tea bags here in my house. How come she's so upset that I've put it there? These are the things that can ruin our day, can't they?
Yeah. I think it's just so interesting that actually what I'm taking away from this is I'm asking for like my 5 quick tips that I can go and execute. But actually what I'm taking away from this is we need to have the conversations. And if this is important and there are people that are part of this, then we need to bring them in and involve them, and therefore figure out stuff that is appropriate to the specific needs of the family at the moment, which I think is a really nice personalizable way to do it. It does also lead us nicely onto next week's episode, where we're just going to troubleshoot some specific things. And I think it just gets into this idea that this is actually really personalized stuff. Like, this is unique. It's not going to be a one size fits all. So what we're going to do next time is I'm going to get Caroline to coach me a bit, or give me some insights based on my specific issues that I'm facing currently on decluttering, tidying, and habits. And I think what we'll do is we'll wrap up for today. Is there anything that you want to add on this, Caroline? Because I was going to ask you about strength-based approach and miracle question. I'm wondering if we actually bring those in to the next conversation. If there's anything specifically that you thought you wanted to touch on here.
What are you good at work? What do you do well outside of your home? Bring that into your home. It's just systems. It's the same thing. Well, it's nuanced systems, because it's tied up so heavily with how we feel about our possessions, which is extraordinarily complex. But if you're good at organising at work, and you probably are, then bring those skills, bring those strengths into your work. And if you want to do the strength survey as well, work out what are your commonly used strengths, and then use your love of learning. I've got many of my clients, their most used strength is love of learning, curiosity. Let's use their curiosity to work out why this is an important possession or why it isn't. We can even use humor. If it's zest, play music while you're doing it. What is it that's going to work for you to get this done?
And actually, that is a conversation I have with my male clients, who will tell me that, they're used to being really organized at work, and they don't necessarily bring that proactive planfulness to their home life. And I think that that's an echo of what you're talking about here. It's a really nice message to actually say we're often really good at this stuff. We just haven't applied it to our home lives in the same way. And if we do, we might get some of those fantastic benefits. I'm going to leave it there.
We can relax.
So we can relax, and we can be. And we can feel, and we can be in our homes. Lovely way to end it. And I'm going to leave it there, and look forward to our little coaching session or conversation next time. Thank you so much, Caroline.
Cheers, you.
Thank you for listening to Life Work with Maya. If you've got to this point, I'm guessing you found it valuable. So do share the link with somebody else who can benefit. In an age of materialism and us trying to stay on top of clutter, what could be nicer than to send a non-clutter digital link to somebody and say, I listened to this and I thought you might love it. What a great way to show your care and consideration for them. If you haven't left a review, now is the time, and make sure that you are subscribed on Spotify or you're following along on Apple Podcasts. And if you really want to help the show grow, then do share the link on IG stories, Instagram stories, or reshare or discuss your thoughts with my LinkedIn posts. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Do feel free to send me messages there. I love having dialogue with my listeners, and the links to those handles are in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to connecting with you next time. Bye-bye.